There is to date a removal of about 3,000 tons of CO2, which is not that much looking at the bigger scheme of the climate, but actually we are a top 10 provider in this novel market, and as such we're really amongst the front runners of actually proving that impact can be generated in this area, thus building trust in this early market so that it can grow on in the future, which absolutely needs to happen.
Welcome to BizShift, where we talk to global industry leaders about their transformations in their industries. I'm Dirk Klee, BlackRock's country head in Switzerland. I'm here with Valentin Gutknecht, co-founder and co-CEO of neustark. neustark is a pioneering Swiss company that has developed an innovative approach to help remove unavoidable carbon emissions from our atmosphere and convert them into essential construction materials like concrete that can be used to make buildings or roads. By leveraging cutting-edge technology, neustark is leading the way for the future of the construction industry. Valentin, it's great to have you here today. Can you give us a snapshot of where the carbon industry stands today?
Sure, glad to do so. And actually I'll start with an outlook on where it should be by 2050 in order to reach net zero. And that's about an annual removal of 10 billion tons of CO2. That's going to be a $1 trillion market, at least. Where do we stand today? Well, 5 years ago, the market has not been existent at all. Right now, total spending on carbon removal is at about 3 billion. So we have seen a massive growth in the last years, but still a lot needs to happen over the coming decades.
So neustark is using a mineralization process to store CO2 in recycled concrete. Can you break that down, what this unique method is and also how it compares to other carbon capture technologies?
Yeah, sure. I think there's really three factors which differentiate us from other approaches. The first one is that we are delivering impact as of today. So there's many approaches with high potential, but for now they're plans and hopes. So we are doing this, delivering impact, running plans as of today. And then point number two is that what we're doing, CO2 storage in concrete, so actually mineralizing the CO2, we turn it into stone, into limestone, is widely regarded as the most permanent form of carbon storage. Point number three is that within those high permanence approaches of storing carbon, what we're doing, because we do it so locally, we take CO2 and there is pretty much always concrete very nearby to store it in. Short transportation distances, that makes our approach very, very competitive compared to other highly permanent solutions. There is to date a removal of about 3,000 tons of CO2, which is not that much looking at the bigger scheme of the climate, but actually we are a top 10 provider in this novel market. And as such, we're really amongst the front runners of actually proving that impact can be generated in this area, thus building trust in this early market so that it can grow on in the future, which absolutely needs to happen.
And you're working with a variety of partners, including biogas plants and major companies. How critical are these collaborations in scaling the emerging industry?
Working in partnerships is really in the DNA of our company. I think it relates back to how we are as founders at the end. And I have a deep belief that the challenge to be tackled and the opportunity here is so big that we really need to leverage partnerships. We need to leverage existing markets, and that's going to be the only plausible fuel actually to drive such a development. So we really want to use the power of markets actually to do the necessary scale up, and that means you need to market the product as of today, sell it to customers, partners.
You only started a couple of years back and you've seen the industry evolving and you still have demand, as you're saying. But looking out into the future, 5-10 years, how do you see this industry evolving?
So 5 to 10 years from now, we'll see in Europe alone like dozens of millions of tons of CO2 being captured from projects that have final investment decisions, large-scale carbon capture projects. And only this will be a huge leap from where we stand today to actually dispose of this CO2. So we see this need that's going to emerge of actually a service that deposes captured carbon just out of the projects that have been decided already as of today. So that's one thing we see. And then another thing which will need to emerge if we actually follow up on climate pledges is a rise in carbon prices, because only that will actually trigger the necessary measures to get there towards that goal. And that will then be probably the next big commodity market that is being created.
So your product right now is capturing carbon and putting it back into disposable concrete. Are you thinking about expanding your product set, and can you put carbon into other materials or other areas?
Absolutely. So storing CO2 in recycled concrete is a very good point to start. It is a very low-hanging fruit, but we're growing from there. So there's a whole set of other mineral waste streams, slags and ashes coming out of all kinds of industries, from steel production, for example, or waste incineration. So we're working on that. And then thinking about CO2 storage, of course, it's nice to store whatever possible in local mineral waste streams, but there will be not enough of them to dispose all of this CO2. So those approaches will need to work in parallel also with geological storage of CO2.
You're working in a very innovative field. Is it easy to tap into talent, and where are people working at neustark usually come from?
I mean, it's certainly easier for us to find talent than for others, because many people as of today are working for meaningful jobs. So it's easier for us, but it's not easy, and we have to go for the very best talent with the ambitious goals that we have. So attracting and maintaining the very best talent is probably the core challenge we have as a company at the end, because it's all about people. And I think what's really decisive beyond the impact factor, which is kind of a given, is really to create an upwards spiral of growth for employees. So attracting the very best, insisting on high standards, that makes people realize, hey, I can grow here, and that attracts then also other talent that wants to grow, and it becomes an upward spiral. And I think that's very key for the development.
Is location an issue in this context? You're here in Bern, probably you're tapping into some young talent from universities, but also from other exciting areas. I've been at your construction site, so that's very much a down-to-earth job.
So in what we do, location certainly matters, because it's a offline real thing where people need to be on site. So luckily the business is also very decentralized, so we'll need people that sell those plants, that maintain those plants wherever the plants stand, and they are already now really across Europe, and that means we also have a wide range of talent in which we can tap. So although we have headquarters in Switzerland, we're really looking for people pretty much across Western Europe, because the plants are across Western Europe.
And call it your starting product, right? Putting carbon back into concrete. That is innovation in itself, but innovation is not standing still. So how do you think in terms of, the products, the areas you're covering today versus building out into the future, and how do you organize that?
Yeah, I think the key innovation was to figure out how to store CO2 in concrete, and then you have this proof of concept, the first pilot plant. That is one step of innovation. Then you start to scale, and you realize that, okay, actually organizing all of the mundane things around, like business processes, reporting structures, etc., in a very short amount of time, that in itself is another kind of innovation, because if those things aren't in place, you only get that far. So that needs to be managed, and then at the right point of time, you also need to have your next innovation on the technology front. It's really a roller coaster, this innovation thing, where there is always at any given point of time one key area where you need to innovate as a company.
And you started here in Switzerland, which is a very innovative place, as we all know, right? Very tech heavy, very mechanic focused. You now have plans to expand into Europe, and you have set up recently another site in Germany. How do you think about international expansion? Where's the opportunity for neustark? And think a little bit forward, 10, 20 years. Who do you want to be?
So we're a top 10 player in carbon removal, and certainly we want to remain so, to even increase in that ladder. That means we need to, come up with novel, even more efficient technologies, but also rapid internationalization is a key towards that growth. And for us, with the product we have right now, that really means that we need to be where a lot of concrete is demolished, and a lot of concrete is demolished where people have built with concrete already 80 years ago, because that concrete is now being torn down, meaning that for now the major growth lies in highly developed economies like Western Europe, then North America eventually, some Asian countries, and then from there it will emerge to regions that are highly rapidly growing right now, where it takes some decades until this concrete is deconstructed again.
And you are a still very young founder and co-CEO of a startup, then growing into a quite big company. So what's the challenge for yourself to keep up with all these kind of evolving demands, now taking the company international, right? It's probably also more governance that you need, right? It's not the R&D anymore where you're focused initially.
Yeah, it just described really the challenge. Challenge is that the job changes by the week, if not by the day. It took some time to realize that once you overcome that next hurdle, it's not going to be fine, but the next one comes. And then I think the key is to kind of find comfort in that and accept that as the routine, that there's always something new. That's a huge opportunity for growth at the end.
And is there any specific leadership lesson that you can share with us? Maybe a defining moment, an obstacle that you overcome with your team, or something that you learned for yourself?
Oh, many probably. It's really, you start off with a very small team. Everybody knows exactly what the others are doing. Then you start to grow, you start to have hierarchies, start to model as a founder that you should trust everybody and delegate responsibilities, which is certainly a good ambition to have. But then you realize that as you're growing so quickly, it's really challenging for information to flow quick enough to land at the right direction. So I think we really realized that despite we're growing, we're more and more people, and we need to have some structures. We really need to make sure that then information still flows across departments, across hierarchies, and we need to have many formats to actually enforce and encourage that. So from us, the CEOs, a lot of presence on the ground at the plants, just to still really understand what's going on and then to react quickly.
How is neustark's technology helping decarbonize this traditionally hard to abate sector?
As you say, this is a hard to abate sector. To produce cement, you need a fuel to actually heat up limestone and drive out CO2 out of limestone. So for the fuel, you can have a renewable fuel, but then what always remains is that you have to drive out CO2 of the limestone, and for that we don't have solutions as of today, at scale at least. So this is really the key problem we're addressing with neustark, creating a possibility to safely store away those non-avoidable emissions, because we know that we need cement and concrete for many years to come in the infrastructure sector. So that's really what we're there for, to help to create a safe means of disposal for those non-avoidable emissions.
And how do carbon capture technologies like yours fit into the broader shift towards a circular economy?
If you have a close look, carbon or climate and circular economy, they're really both go into sustainability, but it's two different things, and at points you even get a conflict between the two of them. So circular doesn't necessarily mean more climate friendly. That is actually the case often with concrete. Circular concrete doesn't need to be more climate friendly, and there neustark is really a key to align those two factors. So as we store CO2 in recycled concrete, actually you get a product that is at the same time more circular and more climate friendly than the alternatives you have as of today.
And you told me earlier that neustark has a very ambitious goal of removing 1 million tons of CO2. So what will it take to scale your company, which is still quite small, right, to meet that very ambitious goal?
I think three things really. First of all, a typical plant as of today stores around 1,000 tons. So to store a megaton, we need around 1,000 plants. Pretty easy. If we don't do further R&D, and we're doing that, second thing that we need to do to become more efficient so that we can have the same impact with less input or more impact with the same input. And then point number 3 is the balance in all of that. So we need to ramp up the plants, we need to come up with novel technologies, and we need to then nevertheless make sure that we do all at this in a synchronized way. So we need to always source the right amount of CO2, develop the right technologies, have the right storage sites ready. So to keep up this balance in the high-speed growth is a massive challenge, and at the core that can then only be handled by working with the very best people at the end. So I think people are the answer.
So thank you very much, Valentin. You're having obviously a great impact, and wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you, Dirk, for the conversation.